lovely wild hearts, it's Lisa here. Welcome back to another episode of the Wildheart Diaries. How are you all? I hope you're well. I hope you've had a lovely summer. We are kicking off season 3 with a very special episode. Today I am talking to Helen Jenkins. She is a therapist and we went to school together, and we have stayed in touch over the years, but I haven't seen her for a long time, and we reconnected again recently. And Helen specialises in boarding school syndrome, and this is just another cruel, not very nice environment to grow up in, except for we're sold a different story about it, aren't we, when we think about Harry Potter and Enid Blyton books. And so we're here to talk about the similarities in our work of growing up in cruel and abusive environments. We're also here to talk about our jobs as healers and helpers and support people, and a few bits of our childhood pop up as we sort of reminisce. And it was so lovely to reconnect with Helen again, and I think you're really going to enjoy this chat. And I'd love to know what you think. So if you want to send me a message on Spotify or leave me a review on iTunes and let me know. And obviously, if you've got any questions, get in touch. I shall put Helen's details in the show notes and anything that we refer to in the episode that I think you'll find helpful. So pour yourself a cup of tea, sit down and listen in.
Recording in progress.
It's like my Alexa with I thought I was going to set her off then. We've got a cat called Alexa.
Have you?
One of our 5, and I have to be really careful when I speak to her, because sometimes I'll say, well, I'll probably have to say, "Hello, Alexa, do you want something to eat?" And she'll go, "I don't eat or drink, but thank you for asking."
That's so funny. That's so funny. So tell me more about the boarding school syndrome, and like how you got into all of that, and like what first sparked your interest, and then how you ended up specializing in that. Tell me more about that.
Well, it's weird because it kind of just happened naturally. So I can't even remember how it started at the very beginning, but I remember getting interested in watching documentaries. So I don't know if you've seen that documentary. It's quite old now, by Nick Duffel, and it's called The Making of Them.
No, I haven't.
Definitely worth a watch. It's really interesting for anybody, really. And I just was watching it, and I was quite obviously, quite affected by it. And I just started one day just looking at different documentaries, and then I started reading stuff about it, and I was like, I'm getting quite interested in this. Anyway, obviously I'm already working as a counsellor, and a CPD opportunity came up, and it was I think it was a morning, it might have been a full day of CPD, introduction to boarding school syndrome. So I was like, yeah, of course, I'm definitely going to do that. And there was the option, you could either do the one day CPD and get a CPD certificate for it, or it could be the first of a series of classes, sessions, if you like, that could go towards this postgraduate diploma. Right. So I entered it, as I said, as a CPD thing, but as soon as I was into it, I was like, no, I need to do this diploma. I was really jealous of all the people that, that were like, on to do the diploma. I was like, no, this is my thing. I've got to do this. So I went to Daryl and said, need some money. Could we pay for me to do this? So yeah, he got his credit card out, and I paid up for the full course. And I didn't really know where this interest had come from, although I knew, like you say, cognitively, mum went to boarding school, but what's that got to do with me? I couldn't quite make the connection at the time. And it wasn't until I was actually on the course that it all became very clear. Well, of course, because, I'm a product of the upbringing of an ex-boarder. So I'm the daughter of a mother who had limited role modeling as a parent, and all the various other things that come with it. So I was like, of course I can sense the connection. I just couldn't, I didn't put two and two together at first. And the interest just went on from there. The more, you know, I really enjoyed the course. I met some great people, and I've just got more and more interested in it. And as I said to you, I've started doing a little bit of writing. Always liked writing, and always said I want to do writing at some point, and kind of said, oh, when I retire, I'll write a book. But I've had a couple of opportunities recently to actually write about boarding school syndrome. So it's kind of ignited the writer in me as well, which is really nice.
It's brilliant. Mrs. Millard would be so proud of you. Mrs. Millard would love that. Do you remember her?
Do you know, of course I remember. I always think about Mrs. Millard.
So do I.
Do you? Because I mean, I'm so grateful to her that I'm so great at grammar, because we had little choice but to be brilliant at grammar, didn't we?
I know. I did like her though. She was quite an eclectic, unique personality. But I always felt encouraged by her, and I thought she was a good teacher.
She was a really good teacher. Very, very clear. She knew her stuff.
She was our form teacher though when we were in 1L, when we first started. 1L. Do you remember? Because her desk was on the side of the classroom where we used to sit.
Her desk
at the front. We were right in front of her, weren't we?
Yeah, and you were all friendly to me. I remember you looking at my name badge. Do you remember this? You looked at my name badge and, oh, Helen, I'm Lisa, nice to meet you. And I went and sat behind you.
I just remember meeting you at the swimming pool.
I know.
That's when I remember meeting you was that after the open day? Yeah,
it was afterwards. I couldn't believe it. I went to Fox Hills. And there you were in the outdoor pool, and I always remember we were swimming together. I remember chatting to you afterwards, and you had this proper like side parting, and you kept combing it.
It was you, Helen. It was you when we went to college that scrunch dried my hair, because you had a perm and I wanted curly hair. You scrunch dried my hair with loads of mousse, and that's how I discovered that my hair was curly.
Brilliant, and look, it still is.
But back to the boarding school. So can we tell people, like, how do you spot someone that's got boarding school syndrome, and like how would you define what it is, like, so people can understand a bit more about what they'd be looking for?
Well, I think often it will not be the client, we'll call them themselves, that will necessarily identify it. It could be that they have gone to see a therapist for any number of reasons, and the therapist, you know, if they've got a background and an understanding of boarding school syndrome, might pick up on these things and go, actually, did you go to boarding school? So to name some of those things, there are a lot of potential symptoms, for want of a better word. You know what I mean? So it could be, like a lot of us have, you know, low mood, anxiety, OCD. It might be things like confusion about identity, because when you're brought up in an institutional environment, there is little opportunity for, you know, for self-expression. You may have poor feelings of self-worth, because as much as your house mistress or housemaster might care about you, they don't love you in the way that a positively functioning family would. A mother and father, or you know, or equivalent. So there might be feelings of low self-worth, relationship difficulties, as we spoke about briefly earlier. Where are the role models for you know, a romantic or intimate relationship? You're not seeing that day to day. You're seeing teachers and housemasters. So there's not that role modeling, but also you're living with you know, a whole group of peers with all different characters, issues, backgrounds, and you can get kind of swallowed up in that. And well, again, the whole sense of identity thing. What else? Another thing is another thing that can happen I'm sure you're aware from trauma, is gaps of loss of memory. Yeah. So as we know, when we experience trauma, one of the things that our body can do is try and save ourselves from experiencing that. So that's when we go into, you know, perhaps dissociation, or go into the freeze mode. So we don't feel it, because it's just too much for us to handle. So it might be that people say, I don't remember very much about growing up. They also normalize cruelty. I'm sorry to say
Helen, that's awful.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm sorry to say that the cruelty definitely went on a lot, you know, when we were school age. Unfortunately, it still goes on. I think there is a lot more awareness of child protection, but there is still this stuff still going on. And so I've heard stories of, I don't necessarily want to go into details of stories, but I have had people recount cruelty, experiences of cruelty, which, listening to it, I found quite very shocking and quite distressing. And they're telling me this as if they're telling a story. Oh yeah, this happened, and then they did this, and I'm saying, sorry, did you just say they did this to you? Yes.
So they're a bit detached from the experience, like it's happening to someone else.
As if it's exactly, because they've gone into that safety mode where it's just too much for them to deal with. So they've gone into the freeze or the dissociation, and it's got to the point where and it's so familiar that they they can just talk about it as if it's a story.
Would you say it's more like, so the adults in charge, would you say it's more like power trippy? So it's more like psychological abuse, gaslighting, bullying. It's not physical. I know back in the day it would have been physical abuse, because I know that my parents had the belt at school. They didn't go to boarding school, but I know that corporal punishment was a thing at schools. But is it more psychological and emotional abuse, or neglect, maybe even, or both? I don't know.
Yeah, I think unfortunately there's bullying that goes on between peers and with staff members, and also sexual abuse still goes on. And I know it's shocking to know that. And I kind of, when I started this training, I kind of assumed that we were talking about, you know, adults that were perhaps, you know, our sort of age, talking about things that happened to them when they were at school. But actually this stuff's still going on, and it can be between peers, because of course, if they're not brought up, if they're not taught about, you know, normal things like what is puberty, what is it turning into, what is sex, and it's okay, and it's not taboo, and actually these are the things that are going to happen to your body, these are the feelings that you might feel, and actually this is what happens when people feel a connection to each other, and it might become sexual, and all the rest of it. This is all, it's not discussed. And so they, you know, they learn about puberty and sex from their peers, and you can imagine you know, the misinformation that must go around, and how terrifying it must be. But also there are staff members that abuse their power in that way as well. And
well, I've also heard that that breaks my heart when you say it, because I've also heard that, because if you're learning from your peers, like I suppose when we were at school, the boys would read the dirty top shelf dirty mags, wouldn't they? That's what they would do. But my understanding is, not that I've seen any of it, but I hear that the porn that online nowadays is very graphic and emotionally and sexually violent. So then these boys grow up thinking that, you know, girls are going to do X, Y, and Z, and that is part of a loving relationship. And like you say, normalizing that is really dangerous. It's dangerous. And it's also kind of like, if you think about it on a macro level, to how that impacts society, how, you know, if people are growing families from that space, if they then go on to have children, but that's just not healing at all, is it? I always want to think about like globally healing, like what can we do? How can we change things so that that's more, that sort of like feels like we're going backwards.
Yeah, and on an even more terrifying level, look at the government. You know, many of them are ex-boarders, ex-Eton. You know, we've got,
Yes,
you know, we've
I
got
didn't think
people
of
that,
that.
yeah, we've got people running the country. I mean, don't talk to me about politics. I'm not very good at it, but I do know that we've got people running the country who, a lot of them have been to boarding school. They've been taught to, you know, to shut down their emotions,
Yeah,
which could, you know, was catastrophic for
yeah,
running a country. You know, where's that empathy? It's not to say that people that go to boarding school are unempathic, but they're going to find it more difficult to connect to their emotions if emotions are ridiculed, or
yeah.
if they are not nurtured by a parental figure. What are you going to do? You're gonna stuff them down, and they're going to be difficult to access.
I also think it's common when you've got shed loads of trauma and what we would call early developmental trauma. So if you went to boarding school at a young age, you are going to be not connected to the empathy because it would be too painful for you to recognise those abusive experiences that were happening to you. So you have to shut down in order to survive that environment.
Yeah, because what else are you going to do with it? What happens?
You've
if
got
it
no other
comes out? It's
choices.
terrifying. Yeah.
And the other thing I'm thinking of is for people that are listening, it's really common when you've got trauma to have a not a very strong sense of self because your core self has been shattered. That's how I kind of see it, and bits of you get split off, and so then you won't know who you are, and you will mask up, and you will put on a front, and you'll present in a certain way to feel like a sense of belonging, because that is effectively your family, and we all need to feel connected and like we belong, don't we?
That's right. Yeah, yeah. And along those lines of belonging, the other thing that's very difficult is that you are a boarder is being taken away from the environment and the family that they know. So whatever that family looks like, they're being taken away from the familiarity and the safety of that. They're also, even things like our pets, even things like our bedroom. You know, when you're a child, your bedroom is your one way of expressing yourself, not a pin board where you can pin a picture of your mum or whatever, you know, where you've got the same bed sheets as everyone else.
There's not much individuation there, like you say, with the self-expression. Also, the question I wanted to ask is, because I think about children that I've worked with that come from families that are divorced. So that is an adverse child experience to be separate from a family goes into separation. So could we actually be saying that going to boarding school could be seen as an adverse childhood experience?
In my opinion, 100% we could.
Yeah, I think that. I know that other people might not agree with us because there'll be people saying our boarding school's not like that, blah, blah, blah. But we don't know what goes on behind closed doors, and we know that abuse is covert and we don't always get to see that. But I actually think that boarding schools should go into that category of, I think there's like 8 of them, isn't there? I don't know how, I can't remember off the top of my head. But I think that should go into that category, shouldn't it? Because it's traumatic.
I agree, Lisa. And you know what? You know, never mind all the things that we've spoken about in terms of maybe bullying or identity or sexual abuse or whatever. At the very core of going to boarding school is broken attachment. So at the very basic level, you have got broken attachment, and as we know, that is massive. So when you've got the broken attachment, and then you layer on top of that the things that we've talked about, the issues that can come off, you've got a big complicated tangle.
That's complex trauma. That's what CPTSD, isn't it? That's your early developmental. But let's talk. Can you talk more to the broken attachment and explain that more in layman's terms so people can understand what that is?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose in its most simplest terms, attachment is the ideal healthy relationship that takes place between child and caregiver. And the idea behind it is that the caregiver gives that child whatever they need in terms of love and teaching and support. You know, it's to a not yet developed brain, but they give them all the tools that they need so that they feel secure enough that they can actually leave that safe place. I don't know if I'm explaining this very well.
I know really well. That's brilliant. Okay. Keep going.
That they can leave this safe place to go off on their own to discover life things or other things
Yeah,
by
that's
themselves,
brilliant.
but know that they can come back to that secure place. Nick Duffel, so he's the guy in terms of boarding school syndrome, and he's the one that that wrote the book The Making of Them, and also produced that documentary that I mentioned to you, also called The Making of Them.
I'll put that in the show notes for people if they
yeah.
want to go and investigate and explore that
Well
a bit
worth
more.
a watch.
Yeah.
So he describes it, I can't remember the exact words, but he describes it as having the dinner ready at the table for you. So the parent having the dinner ready at the table for the child, so that they can go off and do what they need to do, but they know that that dinner is still there waiting.
Oh, that's lovely. I love that. That's a nice way to think of it, isn't it?
And so as a boarding school therapist, that's what we try to replicate. So it can be compared to an uncle/auntie versus niece/nephew relationship, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So it's so what we do as a therapist is we provide, so for example, I'm the auntie and I've got that hot dinner and I'm trying to nurture you, and I my niece, for example, who's the client, and I want that client to get to a place where they feel robust enough to go and face the bits and pieces in the world on their own, but they know they can come back and that I've given them that secure place, and if they need to come back and have that dinner,
Helen, I love that.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? Yeah,
I love that. I always see myself as a dinner lady, but actually I prefer that one. But no, that's so lovely, because actually I think I do that. I do that for my clients as well.
Sure you probably do, yeah.
And I think we've spoken before, like not today, but when we were messaging before we got in contact, that you do actually love your clients, not in a paternal way or in a romantic way, but you care about, like, I don't know about you, but I'll be having a shower in the morning and like washing my hair, and something will come in for me to do, and I'll think, oh, I must send that to that client because that would really help them, or I really want that client to read that book or watch that film, or because then I don't know, I think when you take a client on, they're always kind of in your like energetic field, and maybe even when they stop working with you, I still think that connection. Like, have you ever read that book, The Invisible String, which is for attachment for children?
I've never heard of it.
So basically it's a story for children, and you say to the child, Mummy's got a string from my heart to your heart, and it can never ever be broken. But when we get separated, it's like an elastic band, it just gets stretched, which is why sometimes when we're away from each other it hurts, or you miss me, and that's normal. So normalizing that when we're not around the people we love. But you know, with what do they call it, is it object relations, where even though the mum isn't present and the child isn't there, the child can still hold the energy of the string, the good love, the good enough. So the invisible string, if you're listening and you've got kids and they've got separation anxiety, that's a really great book to read. But I think that invisible string, as a clinician, is still there. Like you still do. You feel that too?
I do, and I know we have spoken before, and I say to my supervisor, I love my clients, and it doesn't mean that I'm romantically attached to them or anything like that. I just genuinely have a love for them. I know that is it Greek, there's different words for love. There's a love that you feel for your partner, there's a different word to describe love for your parents, and there's all different, and I feel that I have a very specific love for my clients, and I really care about them, and like you said, and I do think about them absolutely outside of the session. I think we've got to be a bit careful, haven't we, about
with the boundaries,
separating, and but we spoke earlier, didn't we, about how we do that, how we can separate when we think, I'm thinking about them, with love, but how we think, if we're thinking about them too much, or if they're getting a bit too much into our lives, but as a rule, that love is there, and I do think about previous clients, and I wonder how they're getting on, and I think you're right, that energy, it stays there, doesn't it?
Would we call it positive? Is that what positive regard is? I mean, I know we hold everyone in positive regard because that's our job. So I don't know if it's the same thing, but I just feel like it is like you're holding them. I know you're sort of talking about that nourishment, as in the meals on the table for them. That's like you being available, emotionally available,
Mm.
obviously but it's within the boundaries of like,
Of course,
the hours you work, when you're switched on, when you're in your therapist mode. It's not 24/7. I just don't want to confuse people by saying that. I'm saying it's within but you work under a code of ethics. Coaches don't have a code of ethics, but I pretty much work under the same code of ethics as therapists, because I have supervision with my therapist, and I kind of work under the same structure that she's taught me that, if you see what I mean. Yeah, because we have to take care of ourselves, because if we don't nourish ourselves and feed ourselves dinners, we haven't got a good support network around us, then we're no good at what we do.
No, absolutely that. Funny enough, the word that if I had to sum up my boarding school training in one word, it was nourishment. We talked a lot about nourishment, but it's in every way. It's not just a food thing. It is emotional. Also a food thing.
Yeah, because I was going to say it is nourishment, because that is mothering. Like, that is part of, if you were talking about reparenting your inner child, that's what you would do. You would nourish, because I suppose the opposite of nourishment is neglect. Like, neglect is not taking care of someone. And I go back to the plant in the greenhouse analogy. So like, I think if the plant's not growing, you don't fix the plant, you change the environment that the plant's growing in. And that is the nourishment. Like, is it getting enough sunlight, enough water? Is it situated in the right spot in the greenhouse, or could it move and go somewhere? Don't need to fix the plants, do we?
Yeah, absolutely.
So go back to that's horrific what you were saying. Sorry, we went completely off on a tangent, but it's good. We were talking about the bullying and the sexual abuse and the cruelty. We were talking about the cruelty. I mean, obviously that is all going to lead into low self-worth, because if you're being treated like that, and some of the time you might be being treated nicely, or as they do in schools, rewarding you and giving you grades, it's that intermittent reinforcement of like, nice me, nice me, nice me. That creates blooming trauma bonds with these people, not healthy attachments.
Yeah. I think the other thing is that you are you aware of like vicarious trauma? So even though you might not be that specific person that's being bullied or mistreated, or the cruelty that I described, being in that environment can also be traumatic for us. Because
or like a witness of domestic violence.
Exactly that. Either because it's distressing to witness, but there's also that fear, could it be me next? There's also that fear, well, what's my role in this? Do I speak up to that person? Do I report, or do I keep quiet? And if I do, what do I do with those feelings? So even being a part of that environment, it can be very damaging.
It's so toxic, Helen.
It is so toxic.
I'm seeing in my head now just like this horrible green soup, like there's just full of. But think about going into toxic environments. You need to wear like protective clothing and Wellington boots and masks. But these are vulnerable children in this, growing up in this environment.
You haven't got any protective clothing because your mum and dad, or your significant caregivers are not there.
Do you think that affects the relationship with the family of origin for the child also? Is that confusing for the child in terms of their relationships with their family of origin?
Well, yeah, I think so, because it's not who they're with every day, and there can be a lot of feelings can come up towards the family as well. It can be it can be anger and resentment towards the family. It can give you feelings of abandonment. Well, why did you abandon me? Why did you send me off to school? Does that mean I'm a bad person? Was it a punishment? But then on top of that, you can get the feelings of guilt. Nick Duffel, to refer to him again, calls it privileged abandonment.
Right.
How dare I speak or think badly of this wonderful education I've been given, where I've got all the hobbies I could possibly wish for, high level of education. How dare I think or speak badly about it? But actually, it's all very well having great education and great hobbies and all the rest of it. Actually, all the hobbies are a distraction. What they do in boarding school is they keep you as busy as possible, particularly on your first few days at the beginning of term, keep you as busy as possible so they can distract you from what they call homesickness. I say bullshit to, are we allowed to say bullshit, or do
Yeah, you can say whatever you like on this podcast, my friend.
I say bullshit to homesickness. Homesickness doesn't exist.
What do you call it?
What do I call it? I call it,
is it abandonment anxiety?
A normal emotion of missing your caregivers and your normal environment.
It's almost like a mini grieving process, I would imagine.
I would say, yeah. And what they do is they, like I said, they keep you busy with all these hobbies, and they have older kids to show you around all the great, the great building, all these opportunities to excite you, and they I don't know if this still happens or if this is something from the past, but certainly in the past they would restrict phone calls to family for, I don't know, weeks at the beginning, so that you can get used to and get rid of the homesickness, which
that's barbaric, Helen.
Yeah, it is barbaric. I mean, boarding school, I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of haters for this, but it can be, compared to being in a children's home.
Yeah.
It's a children's home, but with an academic education. What's the difference?
Well, two things that have popped up to me. I just think about who they call the Ginger Whinger, poor old Harry, Prince Harry. I get so infuriated with the absolute hatred for him online about the fact that he's so privileged and he can afford therapy and it's all right for him. And his mum died. Nothing's going to bring his mum back. Leave the poor bloke.
Yeah.
But also they went to boarding school. So like they've got layers. They're in the most dysfunctional family ever. They've just got layers and layers and layers of trauma, him and William. But we get William presented in one way because he's our king. Like the media manipulate our perceptions of things. And then Harry's like the black sheep, the scapegoat, but actually both of their pain is valid and very, very real. And all the money in the world does not take that pain away.
Absolutely not. I mean, they've been through the whole boarding school situation that we're talking about now, but they've had the additional experiences, obviously, of being part of the royal family, but then their mum dying, which is a massive thing in itself, especially when you're a child, and it being in the public environment, and also having to not show emotions. Your mum's died.
I know.
And everyone's in the country, probably in the world, is watching you, and you can't show your grief for that. Because
I just think of him. Yeah, I see him walking behind that coffin with what's his name, the Queen's husband, Prince Philip, and her Diana's brother, and William and him walking behind the coffin with their heads down, and thinking how much they were stuffing down inside of them, whilst hearing hysterical cries from people that didn't even know their mum. What that must have been like. Head fuck, complete head fuck.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there was something else I was going to say about the privileged abandonment as well. It's gone now. Maybe it will come back in, but I can see how attachment is at the core of that. And that's why, people listening, a secure attachment is so important. And I often quote on here and say to people, if you're a self-healer, you've got so much courage and fair play to you, but there will be parts of healing complex trauma where you will need to go and work with a professional, because you need to recreate secure attachment in order to heal parts of you. Like parts of you won't be able to be healed without that secure attachment. And sometimes that can be if you marry someone who's really lovely. Or for me, it was a pet. Like I look after my friend's dog and he became another secure attachment for me. What you were saying about pets is so valid. The number of kids that I've worked with that were coming to me for probably bereavement grief counselling, really, for the fact that they're an only child and their pet is their friend and their pet dies, and the parents are like, oh, we'll just get another hamster, or oh, just get another rabbit, and without realising the symbolism of what that pet meant to that child.
Yeah, I mean, pets are they're a lot. They're incredibly important to us. I mean, they give us unconditional love for a start, but also the you know, from a physical point of view, that stroking of an animal can be very calming, and it actually physically can reduce our blood pressure. You know, it's very healing. You know, they can't see us, but I'm actually stroking midair at the moment.
But that is, honestly, it actually regulates your nervous. Well, that's co-regulation. Like if you had a parent when you're upset, and you had a parent that allows you to express your emotions. So at boarding school, you're cut off from all of that. You haven't got your safe person to co-regulate with. Imagine if you're faced with a really strict, cold teacher. I think we've all had one of those at school. If that's all you're faced with as a source of comfort, I'm sure they had. Do you remember, like, I don't remember who else was at our school, but like, I suppose if you were sick, you went to the medical room, and there's probably a nice lady in the office that would say, "Oh, do you want to ring your mum? Do you want to go home?" And there's always that one person in those environments who could possibly save you and be kind. But equally, there's just as many cold-hearted, strict, bullying, brutal people, aren't there?
Yeah, but the thing is with the school that we went to, is that you know, whatever happened in that school day and whatever scary teachers we came across, at the end of the day, we went back to our homes. And I know that they looked different, but you know what a border doesn't have is that you can't get away from it. You're still amongst.
So there's no safe place for them.
No, there's no safe place. No, because quite often, you know, you're in a dorm. So, you know, what if you want to cry? Who's going to comfort you? Is anyone going to comfort you? Are you going to just, you know, cry and try not to make any noise in your pillow at night? There's nowhere to go with it.
How lonely. What a lonely existence for a kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
So lonely. And I suppose, like you say, it's the circus. Oh, there's all these privileges and all these things for you to do, and you're so lucky. Did you ever read the book, Helen, Mallory Towers by Enid Blyton, when you were growing up?
No, but I did read The Naughtiest Girl in the School, which was also Enid Blyton and was about boarding school. So yeah.
Yeah. And they present it all as like wonderful, because recently they put Mallory Towers on the TV, and my niece, who's 10, has said to me, "I'd love to go to boarding school." And I thought, well, speak to my friend Helen. I don't think you'll want to go after you've heard what she tells you it's like.
A lot of kids, whether they're our age and they read Mallory Towers or The Naughtiest School, or they're younger and they've watched Harry Potter, you know, will say, well, I thought it was going to be like that. I thought it was going to be about midnight feasts and you know, fun and hobbies and stuff. And some parents will even say, well, you said you wanted to go. Well, of course they said they wanted to go to boarding school because they thought it was going to be fun, and you know, being amongst your friends all the time and doing hobbies. Of course that sounds like fun. But how does a 5-year-old, even an 11-year-old, really know what it's going to entail?
Yeah, they think it's going to be all jolly hockey sticks, and it's very far from that. Do you see a lot of services people?
Yeah,
because I'm thinking that, you know, if your dad's placed in Ukraine or wherever, then you move around with him. But to stop you from moving around, so you've got a base, as it were, then you end up in boarding school. I would imagine that's quite common, is it?
It is quite common. Yeah, it is common because you know, from the parents' point of view, the intention is positive. You know, we don't want our child to be moving from this place to that place. So if we send them to boarding school, then they are going to have a secure environment. But the trouble is, it might be secure in terms of, you know, the building, the place, and the familiarity, but it's not secure in terms of what we were talking about, you know, like with the attachment.
That attachment, that's probably one of the things I'd like people to really take away from today. And if you have insecure attachment, and you know, many of us do, I think a large percentage of the population have insecure attachment for one reason or the other. There can be many reasons for it. There's nothing wrong with you, and you can heal it. You just have to go slow, and it takes time, and you need to put yourself around good people and communities that are nourishing and nurturing and safe. You need to be around safe people. That's so important. And because I talk to people that come out of abusive relationships, when you come out of an abusive family system or abusive relationships, you don't always know what safe looks like.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yes, it can be hard to Yeah, it can be hard to tell. Yeah, which is why, you know, going to a therapist, you know, at least you know that that person is safe, because we're bound, like you said, by the code of ethics, where you may not necessarily recognize in your everyday life who's safe to be around,
Yes.
because you're not used to using that intuition.
Yeah. And if you've been to boarding school, we're calling it boarding school syndrome, but I actually think it's just a child. It's the same as a child that grows up in an abusive home. You live your life in survival mode, and there is never a safe space for you to rest in. Your nervous system is shot to shit. Your body's flooded with cortisol. And that's why, do you see any physical illnesses, things like autoimmune diseases or digestive issues or eating disorders? Like, they are all symptoms that there's something deeper to be healed in there, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know if you've heard of this, but I do take it with a pinch of salt, but in the therapy world, we sometimes use, is it a synonym or an analogy where, say, for example, you keep losing your voice, then you might say to the client, what's going on there? Are you not finding your voice? What is it that you need to say? And what's stopping you from saying that thing? So certain physical ailments can show themselves. I mean, if we've got emotions that need to be processed and they're not being processed, they're being stuffed down, they've got to go somewhere, so they're gonna come out, like you said, a lot of the time in nervous system issues, but they're gonna come out, so we're gonna experience them. And sometimes, you know, people will go to the doctor saying, you know, I've got this ailment and I've got that ailment, and then another, you know, and then another one comes up, and the doctor's going, well, we've run all these tests and actually we can't find anything physically wrong with you.
Yes, I've read about those mystery illnesses. I think that they're just all, like you said, suppressed or unprocessed or forgotten parts of yourself and emotions. We do live in a world that is quite emotionally stunted, though. Do you not think?
Yeah, I do. It surprises me, because I think sometimes I forget, like being a therapist and being in a therapist world, I forget. And then I hear people say that they feel, you know, scared to go to therapy or ashamed of it. And I think, God, you know, we've still got a long way to go for, you know, mental health troubles to be accepted as normal. We're not normal, but it's normal for our bodies to try and help us in whatever way that looks like.
The messages, aren't they? They're giving us messages, and also I think we live in a world, especially now, like children are being brought up in this online world where they're programmed to focus even more outside of themselves, not just on what the adults tell them, but there's so many more things to distract them and take them away from the wisdom of their own bodies, their intuition. And no wonder there's an epidemic of anxiety. It's just the children saying, it's the plant in the greenhouse. It's like, this greenhouse is just really shit. But they're not allowed to say it because everyone else is living in it. So everyone else, if it's all right for everyone else, then what's wrong with me? Then that's shame talk, isn't it? That's saying there must be something wrong with me. So I was going to say, so can we go on? Say what you were going to say. Go on, say what you were going to say.
I forgot. Go on. Actually, I was going to talk. No, I was going to just mention about a lot of people who go to boarding school. They're very much, we call it being in your head. I don't know if you're familiar with that expression. So everything's up here. Oh, they can't see me, the people listening, but I'm cutting off my head. So everything's up here in your mind. And it's difficult to connect, even to acknowledge or to connect to emotions that are in our body. So one thing that can be helpful, I mean, there are different ways that you can help ex-boarders to try and heal. And one of the things that they can do is body work. So getting into their body, we call it. So that might be, and obviously there are different things that work for different people, and some people would cringe and some people would thrive. But expressive dance, for example, yoga, maybe. I mean, yogic breathing, you know, for anxiety, it can be fantastic, because it makes us, I had horrific anxiety, as you probably know, when I was growing up, and yoga has don't like to use the word cured, but you know what I mean,
Yeah.
cured me of that, in terms of I now own and I'm in control of my breathing and my anxiety.
Brilliant.
So that can be really helpful. Also, things like hip opening exercises.
Yes.
We store a lot of emotions in our hips, and I mean, I've done it myself, where I've done a hip opening exercise and I've cried, and it's not unusual for people to cry in yoga sessions. It can be quite,
it's a release.
Yeah. The other thing, like we said, about stroking a pet. Also, do you know that hugging releases?
I teach my clients to hug themselves.
Hug yourself. Yeah, you can do it. It's the same as hugging another person, just that. Or
put your hand on your heart. I say, if you put your hand on your heart and just take deep breaths in, that kicks in the part of your brain that calms your nervous system down. And that becomes a bit of a habit, like it's just an automatic go-to when you're upset. Just put your hand on your heart and breathe and get and feel yourself in your body. Because if you've got trauma, then it just is, the past is becoming the present, isn't it? So you need to get back into your body to remind yourself that you're an adult and it's not happening now. The past is not happening now, and you're in control and you can leave and you've got choices. But when you're triggered and you go off into that other space, you forget that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The body work's powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. Eating disorders is another thing. Binge eating, that physical thing of stuffing ourselves, stuffing down the emotions that we may not dare allow
out. How awful, because it just is human to be. We are emotional beings.
We are,
and to not be allowed to express your emotions, well, that just feels like the cruelest thing of all.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? I think that's why I'm so passionate about it, because it just feels so wrong to me. It just feels so unnatural, and I find it hard to get my head around, and I think that's why I keep learning more and more about it, because it
makes you more curious, because you go digging and then you find you come across something else, and then you go digging again. Is there anything else? Obviously people need to go, and if they recognize themselves in what we've talked about today, then they do need to we can speak to Helen.
Or if you don't feel drawn to me specifically, there are plenty of other therapists, and I'm happy to signpost people to other therapists with different approaches. We've all got different approaches and different styles. There are some groups. Ex-boarders often report having different experiences, whether they were male or female, because it can be a very patriarchal. Is that the right word? Patriarchal. Environment. So women have their experience of what it's like to be in that, and how to access their feminine side. And men often report different experiences as well. So you can go to workshops for ex-boarders, male specific ones, female specific ones. I expect.
Are you going to create a workshop, Helen?
I could.
Would you like to?
Yeah, there's a lot of things I'd like to do. I'd like to do more.
Maybe that will come.
Yeah, it feels like a big thing. The whole imposter syndrome thing. I see other people doing things, and I think, well, they're the specialists, but actually,
you're so knowledgeable. Like you're very knowledgeable, and you've got experience of working with those people, and you understand what that's like. And obviously, having come from that in your family of origin, you've also got experience of it. Okay, it's one generation removed, but it still has an impact on you. Like I was saying about the alcoholic family system, it still has an impact. No, that just popped into my head because I run workshops, and I think the thing I found most intimidating about it, first of all, was having to hold space for loads of people and worrying about if I had the capacity to hold space for them. But I started off with kids, so I don't know if that was like my training background for that, if you like, because it's different having a room full of kids to having a room. Well, I don't know, isn't it? Because all the inner children come out, so maybe that's the best training you could possibly have.
Yeah, but of course I don't have experience with children very much, so for me it would be more terrifying to be amongst the children, actually.
Maybe we could do something together.
Well, I did think that it would make sense, wouldn't it, with our backgrounds. Well, Nick Duffel says that because when I did my training, the majority of the people on the training course were ex-boarders, and there was, I think, 4 of us that were not. But Nick Duffel said, he's an ex-boarder also. He says we need you. We need the non-ex-boarders, because we need you to remind us that these experiences are not okay and they're not normal, and the things like the cruelty that I spoke about, to remind them.
That's so true, because that was their experience, wasn't it? And that can be their overriding experience. I'm sure at times that I know myself, having trauma, yes, I have my good days, but there can still be something that can happen, the way someone looks at me, the smell, a piece of music, remembering something from my past, that can bring up such strong emotions in me. Actually,
music and smell, very significant. Yeah, I had a client who he had not a phobia, but if he heard this certain hymn, he's an adult, he's in his, I don't know, he's about 40 years old, for example. He said if he hears this specific hymn, he goes straight back into that assembly. And you can feel all those feelings, and it makes him feel physically sick.
I bet. And the smell of school, you remember the smell of school. Polished floor, stale school dinners from that are left in the assembly hall, because we used to eat our lunches, didn't we, in the assembly room with the stage. And also then the smell of the sweaty changing rooms, people's trainers, and but the smells of school are very, very strong, aren't they?
Yeah. So going back to food, actually, you just reminded me, the other thing is and again, I'm not sure about nowadays, but certainly adults coming to therapy who were boarders, when we were youngsters, is that the food was very, very poor quality as well. Actually, saying that, I have a client, she's about 25, so she's young, so it wasn't that long ago, and she talks about the food that they were given, and it was unhealthy, not nourishing. And so she, a lot of the time she just wouldn't bother eating, or she'd pick up they'd be like a packet of crackers and cheese, so she'd just grab that.
But let's give some, because we did have this conversation before we press record. I think, as we're on the subject of nourishment, which is really what we would call self-care or self-soothing, let's just back and forth to finish off. I'd loved our chat today, by the way. We should do it again.
I would love to.
Let's just back and forth brainstorm a couple of ideas of how we can help people who were neglected or didn't grow up in families where they felt safe and loved, of how they can nourish themselves. So I was going to start off with we were saying this earlier. I was saying to Helen before I came on the call that I was feeling quite tired today, because I've been going through a bit of a healing crisis and uncovered some more stuff. And I said, when we get off the call today, I'm going to, because it's raining outside here, I said, I'm going to wrap myself in a blanket and read my book. She said, oh, lovely. But just something with a hot cup of tea or a milky drink. We're saying just something like that can be just to hold yourself.
That's right.
So that you feel love. That is simple, but it's powerful.
Like I was saying, like a mother would or should, I said, even sit in front of the TV, put that duvet around you, even over your head, like a baby, even, replicate the mother's milk, or, by having a milky or
lovely
or a plant milky drink, just to replicate that mother's love. So that can be an effective thing to do. I mean, another thing is listen to your body, but I know that can be really
if
hard.
You're not connected to it, that's difficult. And then that's when I would say, get your journal out, people.
You would say get your journaling out. Because
journaling will get you back into your body. Or go for a walk, like if it's not raining.
Yeah,
connecting back to nature and being held by Mother Earth. Yeah, I love the rain. I love the rain. I'm a
Me
weirdo. I
too.
love
My
it.
Pluviophiles. Yeah, love
Yeah,
the
that's
rain.
what it is. A
Yeah,
pluviophile. I forgot what it was called.
yeah.
I've
Yeah.
also got, going back to the blankie, I've got one of those snuddies because my kid
Yeah.
clients used to have them, and I thought, oh my God, I've got to have one of those.
Yeah.
And it's fleecy and really, really soft, like you would have like a snuggler comforter for a baby.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I put the hood up and I like wrap myself in it.
Lovely.
Like those weighted blankets, aren't they called, for people that have
Yes, I really want
autism?
one of those. They sound lovely. Yeah.
Mm.
And the other thing you can do, another idea is to have like a self-care box. So if you're feeling a bit sort of like in your head and ungrounded and a bit spun out and don't know what to do, is go, I could go to my safety box. And what you do is you prepare that in advance. So it might have, yes, I know CDs don't really exist now, but it might have, for example, a CD of music that that is comforting to you. It might have something that you feel, that you can touch, like you were talking about the softness of the study thing.
Yeah.
So what other senses sound as maybe something to eat? Maybe there's a little chocolate that makes you just feel, oh, that feels like luxurious, like I'm taking care of myself and treating myself kind of way. I don't know, whatever
Smells, essential oils are nice.
definitely smells, yeah, whether it's essential oils or just a smell that reminds you of somewhere or something that's comforting for you, so you can have like an emergency self-care box as well.
That's a lovely idea. And that's also preventative, because sometimes when you're distressed, your thinking brain goes offline. And so to have all that prepared in advance is really, really helpful. But I do actually think, and I know it's difficult, that we should take care of ourselves every day, and we should do just little. One of the things that I teach my clients to do to build self-trust is to say well done after everything they've done.
Oh, I like that.
So you make a cup of tea and and you use your name, because that's really powerful.
Okay.
Unless you've got an aversion to being called something and you don't want to, if that brings up bad memories. Because some people say, when you say Lisa, they think they're about to get told off. I was thinking of those people. But like, I'll make a cup of tea like I did, and I say it out loud. I live on my own, so no one thinks I'm crazy. I say, well done, Lisa, I make my bed. Well done, Lisa, I brush my teeth. Well done, Lisa. It sounds really silly, and some people have resistance to doing it. Clients have resistance to doing it to start off with, but it just builds self-trust, because we notice all the things that are missing, that we do wrong, and we beat ourselves up for the mistakes we make. But instead, we're noticing all the tiny little things that we do actually get right every day.
Yeah, and we're teaching ourselves to be kind to ourselves, even though it may just be a cup of tea. We're teaching ourselves to treat ourselves in a certain way. I have a favorite saying, and I always bang on about this to my clients, but my favorite saying is, you've probably heard this before, be careful how you talk to yourself, because you are listening.
Love that. It's so true. And recently I did this inner child workshop with a group of people, and the main takeaway from it was inner child work, but the main takeaway was, I'm going to listen to myself more. Like, they became very aware of how dismissive and ignoring they are, like simple things like really needing a wee and thinking, oh, I'll just hold on to it and go at the last minute, or I'm really thirsty but I can't be asked to get up and get myself a drink. Just little things like that.
Yeah. Another useful one is to just remind ourselves when we're talking to ourselves in a certain way, is how would I say this to my close friend? Because quite often we're very much harsher on ourselves than we are towards other people.
That's so true. Thank you so much, Helen, for talking to me today. It's been really lovely.
It's been so nice to catch up. Yeah, let's do it again.
Yeah, let's do it again. All right.